Rotherham, Newcastle, Rochdale, Oxford, Bristol, Telford, the list goes on, and in city after city, up and down the island, it is a national disgrace, and in the words of Russian President Vladimir Putin, a society that can't defend its children has no tomorrow. As the UK, along with much of Western Europe, that are both rapidly transforming demographically and in response, fast becoming police states fortifying around ever more oppressive, intrusive, and draconian laws, the continent's cities and streets are descending into anarchy. In the UK, vigilante street mobs are beginning to take shape. In France, in his farewell speech last month, the Minister of the Interior sees the possibility of civil war because of the demographic and religious transformation of his country. And in Germany, a secret plot from within the ranks of the nation's elite special forces has seen the formation of assassination squads in response to what they saw as the treasonous betrayal of the nation and the social contract by the political class. These, by any measure, are terrifying developments on a continent where the political leadership is foisting upon the populace ever more radical social transformations, while at the same time, constant curtailment of rights to opinion and speech. And with that, the people of Europe find themselves without the freedom to even discuss the events taking place. And in the words of former President John F. Kennedy, those who make peaceful revolution impossible will make violent revolution inevitable. If you want to get your material, you even need an email address to sign up. Information and links to the site are in the description box below. Widely reported in the controlled media is the steep rise in crime, and particularly violent crime, on the streets of London, which is now a more dangerous city than New York. This for the first time in modern history, and much of it is due to knife crime. As the authorities in the UK concern themselves more and more with the policing of speech and chasing down thought criminals on social media, as well as penalizing those with wrongthink who express negative opinions about the current social experiment and transformation of their country, the situation on the nation's streets continues to deteriorate. Depending on how you look at it, the UK's second city or third by metro population, Birmingham, or Birmingham as it's locally called, is awash in a violent wave of crime. So much so that a 400-strong vigilante mob has formed recently as local people have lost all trust in the local police force. The group hopes to grow bigger and claim to have representatives based in every area of the country willing to help out. In France, Gérard Collomb, France's Minister of the Interior, warned in his farewell speech in October of the critical situation in the country's suburbs. Later, in an interview with Tugdol Denis, editor-in-chief of a popular French news outlet, he predicts very negative consequences for France due to immigration. He also said that communities in France are fighting each other more and more, and it's becoming very violent. It's difficult to estimate, but I would say that 5 years from now, the situation could be irreversible. He also sees secession or a balkanization of the nation and even possibly civil war. In order to avoid such a future, there are many, including French academics, that are calling for the introduction of Sharia law, as well as the creation of a Muslim state within France to appease people that are unwilling to live under the secular laws of the nation-state of France. In Germany, that has been the destination for hundreds of thousands of mostly young men from the Middle East and Africa over the past 3 years, details have emerged of a plot hatched within the nation's armed forces that would have seen the creation of so-called death squads and the targeted assassination of members of the political class as well as leaders of migration groups, as the 200 or so strong group of members of the nation's special forces held them responsible for the resulting series of religiously motivated attacks, sex attacks on German women, as well as the resulting social unrest. The group is allegedly a faction within the Bundeswehr's KSK, the equivalent of the UK's SAS or the Delta Force in the US, and its membership grew when Chancellor Angela Merkel created her open door policy for the world's migrants to come to Germany in 2015. German authorities learned about the alleged secret group during an investigation into a German officer who was caught trying to pose as a Syrian migrant last year. During the officer's interrogation, German security forces learned of his affiliation and his plans to carry out attacks against politicians and migrants that have recently arrived in the country. Because most Europeans alive today have known nothing but peace, security, and prosperity for generations since the Second World War, ideas such as vigilantism, grooming gangs, civil war, revolution, balkanization, and quite literally death squads are not only foreign, but for most surreal at best. Adding to the abject naivete, if citizens are not allowed to even discuss or address the dire situation the continent finds itself in, either through social stigma or the real threat of financial ruin or even custodial sentences, there are no peaceful ways via dialogue to alter the course of events happening in real time, and with that, several outcomes are possible, none of which are palatable. And more to the point, none of these irking social developments are signs of a healthy society, if that even needs be said. Part of the urgency many within the financial, political, and security services obviously feel is the very real and potential threat of another round of financial crashes and ultimately the crash in the euro that would create a political situation near impossible to contain. In fact, there is now talk of a so-called blackmail with Italy threatening the stability of the euro. Should Brussels force the hand of the Italians, many of the large EU banks would fail, and the resulting poverty as being currently experienced in Greece would spill over into most continental European countries, making the welfare programs that are, as now, a kind of tribute that is currently placating much of the population and keeping them from tearing up the streets, well, this situation would evaporate. Moreover, much of the police and security forces in Europe are basically castrated at this point, and most governments do not even possess the means to pacify even one large city, and rely solely on the projection of strength in their respective countries. This is the future that the financial, political, and media class, along with the censorious large tech companies, have chosen for much of the Western world, a Ponzi scheme built on a foundation of lies and sold for 30 pieces of silver. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. At this point, dialogue, conflict resolution, and the ability to speak freely is the only thing that may be able to defuse this social bomb ticking under the feet of Western Europe. Sadly, freedom of speech is the one right European authorities are not only trampling upon vigorously, but